When I married David, I knew that blending families wouldn't be easy. We'd been married for just over 2 years, and while our bond as husband and wife felt solid, there was a different kind of tension I hadn't fully prepared myself for, the kind that settles into a home when you're living with someone who doesn't quite know how to let you in. That someone was his 16-year-old daughter, Eliza. Eliza had lived with David since her mother passed away 3 years before I came into the picture. When I moved into their home in a quiet suburb outside Asheville, I told myself to be patient. I wasn't her mother, and I never expected to fill that role, but I thought that with time, we'd grow into something resembling a relationship. What I hadn't anticipated was the wall between us, quiet but unmistakable. She was polite, never disrespectful, but she kept to herself, always in her room with the door slightly closed, always wearing headphones when I walked past. I made small efforts, suggested outings, offered to help with school projects, cooked her favorite meals when I learned what they were, but nothing seemed to land. Her responses were often limited to a nod or a barely audible thanks. At first, I told myself it was just teenage aloofness, that eventually she'd soften. But months passed, and if anything, the distance between us only deepened. David, ever the peacekeeper, would sometimes ask me gently how things were going between Eliza and me. I'd smile and say, "We're getting there," though inside I felt more uncertain with each passing week. One evening, he mentioned that she seemed more withdrawn than usual. I hadn't noticed anything different. She always seemed withdrawn to me, but his concern made me look closer. That's when I began wondering if I had been going about things the wrong way all along. I started paying attention not just to Eliza's silence, but to the weight behind it. I began thinking more about what it meant for her to lose her mother and then have another woman, me, step into her home, her life, her space. I had viewed her quietness as indifference. But what if it was grief? Or confusion? Or a deep sense of loyalty to her mother that left no room for someone new? I realized that I had been so focused on not overstepping that I had missed the opportunity to actually connect. I had tried to be non-intrusive, when what she might have needed was presence. I hadn't acknowledged her loss. I hadn't asked how she was doing, not really. I had approached our relationship like a task to be managed instead of a person to be understood. We lived under the same roof, but rarely spoke beyond pleasantries. Every dinner was a quiet affair, filled more with chewing than conversation. I told myself I was respecting her boundaries. But in truth, I had been avoiding discomfort, avoiding the reality that Eliza might never want to open up to me. And if she didn't, I wasn't sure what that would mean for our family. That realization settled heavy in my chest. And yet, despite the doubts, something inside me shifted. I stopped focusing on what she wasn't giving me, attention, warmth, acknowledgement, and started thinking about what I could give her. Not in the form of advice or effort, but compassion. Real, patient compassion. I wasn't her mother. I never would be. But I could be someone who noticed, who stayed, who cared quietly and consistently. One chilly November afternoon, I came home early from running errands. David had mentioned that Eliza would be out at a friend's house, but as I stepped through the front door, I noticed her backpack by the couch. I found her sitting alone, knees pulled to her chest, her face buried in her sleeves. I stood frozen for a moment, uncertain. She didn't look up. Her posture was tense, guarded. This was uncharted territory. Normally, I would have kept walking, pretended not to see, afraid of making her uncomfortable. But something in me said not this time. I walked slowly to the opposite end of the couch and sat down. I didn't speak. I didn't make a move. I just sat, letting the silence breathe between us. After a minute, Eliza looked up, startled to see me. Her eyes were red, but she didn't say anything. I didn't either, not right away. Instead, I just said, "You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but I'm here." She didn't answer, but she didn't leave. And in that moment, that was enough. That afternoon marked a turning point, one I hadn't seen coming. The house was wrapped in an unusual stillness, the kind that feels both comforting and uncertain. The heater kicked on and off rhythmically, the only sound interrupting the silence that had become so familiar between us. Eliza and I sat across from one another on the living room couch, the space between us heavy with everything that had gone unsaid for far too long. I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't even sure why I sat down across from her instead of walking by like I had done so many times before. Maybe it was the way her posture had crumpled slightly inward, her shoulders tense, her gaze fixed on the floor. Maybe it was just time. Neither of us spoke at first. I didn't want to say the wrong thing. Didn't want to push her back into her shell with words that felt too forced or premature. I thought maybe she'd stand up and leave the room like usual, retreating behind the thin comfort of her closed bedroom door. But she didn't. She stayed. Minutes passed, the silence stretching and settling like dust in a sunlit room. My hands rested quietly on my lap, and I focused on my breathing, steady and calm, waiting, not expecting anything, just present. That felt like progress. Then, slowly, Eliza lifted her head. Her fingers were knotted into the drawstrings of her hoodie, pulling and twisting them nervously. Her eyes flicked toward me for just a second before dropping again. She exhaled, the sound tight and ragged. "I don't know what's wrong with me," she said, her voice barely audible, as if she was afraid the words might fall apart as soon as she spoke them. "It's like nothing matters anymore. I can't focus. I don't feel anything half the time. And when I do, it's just this heavy thing. All the time." My chest ached hearing her say it. This wasn't just about silence or distance anymore. This was something deeper, something that had been sitting inside her for a long time, unnoticed or maybe just ignored. I stayed still, trying not to let my own emotions cloud the moment. "It's okay," I said quietly, careful not to overwhelm her. "You don't have to explain it all. But you don't have to carry it alone either. I'm here. Really here." There was a flicker of something in her expression, uncertainty, maybe disbelief. She blinked a few times, like she was trying to keep something from spilling over. And then, finally, she whispered, "I miss her." I knew instantly who she meant. There was no need to ask. Her mother. It was the first time she had said it to me out loud. Those 3 words hit harder than I expected. Not because I was surprised, but because I had failed to make space for that grief. I had walked around it, tiptoed past it, tried to be careful and inoffensive, but in doing so, I had ignored the very thing that shaped so much of Eliza's silence. "I can't imagine how hard it's been," I said softly. "I know I'm not her, and I'm not trying to be. But I want you to know that you don't have to hide this from me. You don't have to carry all that weight alone." She looked away again and brushed at the corners of her eyes, embarrassed by the tears that were slipping through. "I just didn't think you'd want to hear it. I thought it would make everything weird between us." I shook my head gently, leaning forward a bit. "It doesn't make anything weird, Eliza. It just makes things real and honest. And I think we could both use more of that." Her hands fell into her lap, and she sat there, unmoving, eyes distant. But she didn't get up. She didn't walk away. Something in her shifted, small but noticeable. The hard lines of her body softened, just a little. It wasn't a breakthrough. It wasn't a tearful embrace or a sudden turning point into instant closeness. But it was something. For the first time, she had let me glimpse what was underneath all the distance. And for the first time, she knew I saw it and that I didn't turn away. We sat there for a long while, saying nothing else. But in that shared silence, something had changed. I didn't know exactly what would come next. But I knew, at last, we had stopped pretending there wasn't something worth building between us. And for now, that was enough. In the days that followed our quiet moment on the couch, something in the air between Eliza and me began to change. It wasn't the kind of change that you could photograph or point to on a calendar. It was subtle, almost invisible, but I felt it. She didn't wake up the next day and greet me with a hug or sit beside me at dinner with a flood of emotions. No grand gestures, no confessions. But there were signs, small, cautious signs that carried weight because of what they meant. In the mornings, instead of rushing through the kitchen like a shadow, she started lingering just a bit longer. She'd pour her own cereal and not rush back to her room. When I asked how her day was as she passed by after school, she actually answered. A few words. A shrug. Pretty good. But without the barrier I'd grown used to. And to me, that was everything. I didn't respond by diving in with more questions or trying to stretch the moments into full-blown conversations. I knew better now. The connection had to come in her time, not mine. Instead, I gave her space but stayed near, present, warm, but unassuming. I didn't hover, and I didn't push. I simply kept showing up, quietly and consistently. There was a comfort to this new rhythm. The house no longer felt divided into occupied and unoccupied spaces. There were moments of shared silence, shared air, and the occasional soft exchange that felt natural, not forced. It was still delicate, and I reminded myself every day not to mistake silence for setback. progress didn't always speak. One evening, David was working late, and the house was unusually still. The kind of quiet that used to feel awkward now felt, somehow, peaceful. I sat curled up in the armchair with a worn paperback, while Eliza was across the room, scrolling through her phone on the couch. The TV was off, the lights dimmed. We were in our own worlds, but we were sharing the space without tension. That alone felt like progress. Then, something happened that surprised me. Eliza put her phone down. Not face down as if ignoring it for a second, but completely away, resting it on the arm of the couch. She sat back, staring at the far wall, not really watching anything, just thinking. I looked up from my book, sensing something shift in her energy. "You've been quiet today," I said softly, cautious not to disturb whatever was moving in her mind. "Everything okay?" She didn't answer right away. Her brow furrowed, and she picked at a thread on the couch cushion. Then, with a quiet sigh, she said, "It's just sometimes I don't know where I fit anymore." Her voice was quiet but steady. My heart ached. She went on, her eyes still fixed ahead. "Everything changed after Mom died. I mean, I knew it would, but it's like, now with you and Dad being close and the house feeling different, I don't know where I'm supposed to be. I feel like I'm watching everything from the outside." I set the book down and gave her my full attention. "That must be such a hard feeling to carry," I said gently. "Like the ground keeps shifting under you, and you haven't had time to find a new place to stand." She nodded, slowly. "Exactly." There was a pause, and then she added, "You and Dad seem good together. I don't want to ruin that or get in the way, but sometimes I feel like I don't belong in it." I leaned forward, my voice calm and even. "Eliza, listen to me. This isn't just me and your dad's house. This is your home, too. You belong here completely. You're not on the outside, and you're not in the way. Your family. Always have been, always will be." She looked at me then, not with suspicion or guardedness, but with something gentler. There was a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes, as if she wanted to believe me, but didn't know if she could just yet. "I'm not good at talking about this kind of stuff," she admitted. "That's okay," I replied with a small smile. "You don't have to be. You can talk when you want to. Or just sit quietly when you need to. I'll be here either way." She nodded. It was subtle, barely a movement, but it felt like a mile forward. Another small piece of the wall between us had quietly crumbled. And in that soft moment, I knew we were finding our way. The weeks that followed unfolded with a kind of quiet grace, like watching a flower slowly open after a long winter. Our relationship didn't transform overnight, and I wasn't expecting it to. But something unspoken had changed between Eliza and me. Something real. We still moved around each other with a degree of caution, but the tension had eased. Eliza didn't shy away when she saw me anymore. She started acknowledging me in small but powerful ways. A brief "hey" when she came home from school, a faint smile when I passed her in the hallway. One evening, she even laughed, really laughed, at a sarcastic comment I made about a terrible recipe I was trying to salvage for dinner. I had never heard her laugh like that before. The sound was clear and sharp, like breaking glass, but in the best way. It was a breakthrough. Not a dramatic one, but enough to make my heart flutter with hope. I continued to give her space. I didn't pepper her with questions or try to pry open her thoughts. I simply let her know, through presence and patience, that I cared. Some days, that meant sitting in the same room without talking. Other days, it meant offering her tea or asking how school was. But mostly it meant being there, consistently, gently, whether she needed me or not. One rainy afternoon, I came into the dining room with a basket of clean laundry, only to find Eliza sitting at the table, hunched over a sketchbook. Her focus was absolute. She hadn't noticed me come in, her pencil moving in soft, confident lines. I had known she liked to doodle. Scraps of paper with faces or shapes often ended up in the recycling, but I had never seen her this immersed. I hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Hey, what are you working on?" She jumped a little at the sound of my voice, but didn't close the sketchbook or retreat like I feared she might. Instead, she looked up, startled but not defensive. Her cheeks flushed slightly. "Just something I'm messing with," she said. Before I could say anything else, she flipped the book around and held it up. It was beautiful. The page showed a quiet city street, narrow cobbled roads, delicate lampposts casting soft shadows, ivy trailing up the side of a brick building. The detail was incredible. It felt moody and alive, like a place she had been in her mind, even if not in real life. That's incredible, I said, meaning it with my whole heart. You have real talent. She gave a little shrug, trying to appear indifferent, but I could tell the compliment meant something. It's just a way to clear my head, she said. Do you ever think about studying art? Or sharing these? She looked away, her voice quiet. I don't usually show people. I didn't think anyone would care. I care, I said, softly but clearly. Something flickered in her expression. She nodded slightly and went back to sketching. Nothing else was said in that moment, but I knew something had shifted. For the first time, she'd let me see something deeply personal, not because she had to, but because she chose to. That evening after dinner, there was a gentle knock on my bedroom door. I opened it to find Eliza standing there, her sketchbook pressed to her chest. Do you want to see more? She asked, her voice low, her eyes focused on the carpet. My heart swelled. I'd love to. We sat on the edge of my bed for almost an hour, flipping through pages. She pointed out the ones she liked, the ones she hated, the ones she started and never finished. Some were just scenery. Some were characters she'd made up, and a few were pure emotion in abstract lines. As we turned the pages, she began to open up, not in a rush, but in steady, honest doses. She asked me questions too. What I thought of certain drawings. What kind of art I liked. Whether I ever drew as a kid. It wasn't just her showing me her world. It was an invitation to share mine, too. And in that quiet hour, surrounded by pencil marks and paper and shy smiles, I realized we had crossed another threshold. I wasn't an outsider anymore. I was someone she trusted, someone she wanted to share things with. The weight of that realization was gentle but immense. We didn't need deep conversations or declarations of love to prove our bond. What we had was real, and it was enough. Our connection wasn't something I forced or orchestrated. It had grown, layer by layer, like the lines in her sketchbook. Imperfect, personal, and completely hers. And mine, too. Thank you for listening to this episode's story. Don't forget to subscribe and check out more content to discover the many fascinating shades of life.